What if I told you that Hamilton's biggest problem in Ferrari is not his age, neither the pressure, nor the adaptation? What would happen if the real culprit was an invisible technical characteristic that is destroying its curved confidence after curve? When the media bomb was announced, Lewis Hamilton signed with Ferrari by 2025, Formula One lived a moment of pure shock. It was more than a change of equipment, it was a declaration of intentions. The heptacampion, emblem of Mercedes for more than a decade, decided to close its cycle with the team that took him to the Olympus of motor racing to seek a new challenge, perhaps the last of his career, in the most legendary team of the championship. The narrative was written alone. The veteran gladiator, a symbol of excellence, arrived in Maranello with the mission of returning the glory to a team that had touched her but not tasting for too many years. Expectations could not be higher. Hamilton did not arrive as any pilot. It arrived as an icon that redefined modern piloting with records of victories, poles, and championships in the hybrid era. There was talk of a historical combination, British talent with Italian passion. From the first test in Bahrain, every gesture, every conversation between Lewis and Ferrari engineers was analyzed to the millimeter by fans and experts. The narrative was perfect. But the track, as always, had other plans. To 3 great awards at the beginning of the season, the reality is painfully different from the imagined. Lewis Hamilton has barely accumulated 41 points and is 7th in the championship. His partner Charles Leclerc, with an identical car, has exceeded it widely both in classification and in race. The result? Growing frustration, media doubts, and an internal pressure that intensifies career after career. The most alarming is not the position in the table, but the generalized sensation of disconnection. There is no harmony between pilot and car. There is no synergy between Hamilton's style and the characteristics of SF25. Every weekend it seems to be a battle to find answers more than an opportunity to fight for victories. The car, far from enhancing its strengths, seems designed to limit it. Even when the results have not been disastrous, the narrative has already deformed. The champion does not find his sight. But there is something deeper than a lack of performance: disappointment. Hamilton, who arrived in Ferrari with the aim of building a golden era, faces bitter recognition that Formula One does not forgive his legends. And in that struggle between expectations and reality, what cracks is not only the confidence in the car, but the entire story of redemption and glory that had been promised. The rear instability of the SF25 is not just a technical defect, it is the nerve center of the crisis that Hamilton lives in Ferrari. In an era where the differences are measured in thousands, losing a tenth of a second by return can make the difference between a podium and a 13th media. What looks like a simple lack of rear balance is actually a deep fracture between the driving style of Lewis Hamilton and the dynamic architecture of the car that Ferrari has produced for this season. From the first training, the data ceased to be numbers to become alarm signals. Cross-telemetry showed an erratic behavior of the rear axle in key phases: deep braking, lateral load transfer, and average curve phase. This is precisely the territory where Hamilton has built his legacy, where his surgical style allows him to delay braking, turn aggressively, and recover traction without losing impulse. But with the SF25, that control zone has become a minefield. Rob Smedley, with years of experience in Ferrari and deep knowledge of technical nuances, expressed it without surroundings. This car does not offer the rear platform that Hamilton needs to operate at the highest level. The SF25 has a rear that dances, which is not planted in the asphalt, which reacts late or evil in the face of the minimum wheel corrections or the braking cast. And when a pilot who bases his confidence and stability faces that type of behavior, everything falls apart. There is no rhythm, there is no predictability, there is no trust. And without trust, there is no performance. To complicate the situation more, Ferrari has opted for a rear suspension design that favors a more aggressive and rotational pilot style, closer to that of Leclerc, which accepts an overlapping car in order to rotate quickly in the vertex of the curve. Leclerc pilot the chaos. Hamilton needs order. This philosophical difference in the pilot has become an internal nightmare for the Maranello team, which sees how 2 elite pilots deliver disparate results with exactly the same car. The loss of confidence in the rear is not limited only to the time per return, but contaminates every aspect of the weekend. The configurations that Ferrari prepares since Friday must be reinterpreted to try to tame that rear axle that does not transmit security. Hamilton has had to reduce its aggressiveness, adjust its braking point, and modify its curve input technique. All this with a cost. Its competitive advantage disappears. Even engineering solutions have been slow to arrive. Adjustments in the distribution of weight, variations of height, New suspension packages and modifications in the differential maps have been tested, but nothing has still managed to reverse the dominant pattern of instability. The simulations say one thing, the simulator another, and the car on track a third. That disconnection between theory and reality is the silent enemy that is burning Hamilton's potential within a project that promised to be glorious. The third great battlefront facing Lewis Hamilton within Ferrari in this 2025 season is not only technical or emotional, it is strategic. In modern Formula One, where every millimeter decision can redefine a race, the relationship between the car and the tires is one of the fundamental pillars of performance. And in the case of SF25, that relationship is broken. The car fails to extract the maximum of new gums in ideal conditions. It is a structural failure that not only limits pure speed in classification, but also compromises the entire career strategy. During the Miami Grand Prix, for example, the unusual case of the case became evident. Both Hamilton and Leclerc achieved their best classification times with used, not new tires. This phenomenon, far from being a curiosity, is a deep symptom of a bad interaction between the car platform and the adequate temperature generation in the compound. In simple terms, the car fails to put the tire inside its operating window at the most critical moment, when 100% needs to work in the first meters of the stint. This generates a domino effect. If the car cannot activate the tire at its optimal point, lose grip, stability, traction, and trust. The pilot feels in each curve, in each attempted back thrown. And when that happens, the entire strategy built around hard compounds for long, soft steins for initial attacks loses meaning. In such a context, the margin of strategic error is reduced to zero, and Ferrari has not shown to have tactical agility to navigate that maze. In addition, the difficulty in correctly reading the degradation of the compounds has been a constant. In Australia, Ferrari decided to prolong the first Hamilton stint when clear signs of fall in the performance of its intermediate tires were already seen. The result was a significant loss of positions and a negative psychological effect for a pilot who was already fighting with the lack of general confidence. Worse, these decisions are not punctual, they reveal a pattern. In changing conditions, Ferrari takes to react. In ideal conditions, the temperature window does not succeed. The SF25 thus becomes a car without tactical response capacity, trapped between poorly adapted configurations and unpredictable yield performance. Faced with this, Hamilton has chosen to try to adapt his driving to this new environment. Instead of imposing his style as he did for years in Mercedes, he has begun to try variants inspired by the Leclerc approach, to release the accelerator before, more gently load the brake, and reduce the level of demand on the tire in the first contact. Technically, this allows the car to maintain a faster speed in curve without causing so much instability. But this adaptation, although brave, implies that Hamilton is running away from his comfort zone, partially renouncing his identity as a pilot to simply stay in the fight. The problem is that this adaptation effort does not always translate into results. The climatic conditions, the evolution of the circuit, and the small changes of compound between large awards such as the jump to toughest tires in China completely alter the parameters that Hamilton and his team try to dominate. And when every weekend starts again from scratch, without a solid base on which to build, the margin to progress becomes infinitesimal. At this point, the big question that surveys in each paddock, in each technical analysis, and in the mind of each fan is the same. Does Hamilton's problem with Ferrari have a solution? The answer, like everything in Formula One, is complex. It is not just about introducing an aerodynamic update or adjusting the differential mapping. It is about reconstructing a broken relationship between the pilot and his work tool, of reconfiguring a car whose basic philosophy is not aligned with the strengths of one of the greatest talents in the history of sport. Ferrari is already working to counter-relish. Internal sources reveal that new rear suspension elements are being developed that allow modifying the dynamic behavior of the car in braking and entering curve. These components could, in theory, stabilize the rear axle and offer Hamilton that solid platform that needs so much. In addition, there are indications that Maranello is experiencing with new rake tilt of the car inclination and weight distribution that can redistribute aerodynamic load to reduce chronic survival of the SF25. But these solutions are not immediate or guaranteed. The components must be designed, manufactured, approved and validated on the track. And all this happens in the middle of a season already underway, with a compressed calendar and a growing media pressure. Hamilton, meanwhile, has shown a resilient attitude, working with simulations engineers, reviewing comparative telemetries with Leclerc and even testing piloting styles that are not part of their DNA. His effort is unquestionable. What is not clear is whether the car can technically and structurally offer the basis you need on the most immediate horizon. Ferrari could resort to intermediate measures. Setup settings to soften the rear axle response, career strategies that prioritize the thermal stability of tires on pure aggressiveness, or even partial redesign in key chassis elements or car floor. All that could temporarily mitigate incompatibility, but not completely eliminate it. And most importantly, these technical decisions must be taken not only thinking about the current season, but also in how they affect the evolution of the 2026 car, which is already in conceptual phase. The other critical factor is time. Formula One does not expect. Each race in which Hamilton cannot perform at the maximum is a lost opportunity to add points, to build trust, to demonstrate that this project with Ferrari has a future. In the world of high competition, patience is scarce and judgments are fast. If Ferrari fails to offer you a real solution before the summer break, the psychological and reputational damage could be irreversible, both for the pilot and for the team. So the solution in theory exists, but it requires more than engineering. It requires vision, coordination, and a real will to adapt the car to the pilot and not vice versa. Because if something has demonstrated the history of Formula One, it is that even the biggest champions can only shine when the car under their hands speaks their same language. And today the SF25 and Lewis Hamilton are not speaking the same language.